Lately, it seems every passing second brings news of another climate-driven disaster. But we still have the power to turn back the clock. Harnessing the power of collective human energy, today's university students are working together to chart a new future, demanding and creating the solutions for a sustainable climate. Our focus in science, engineering, activism, and politics offers the potential of a better tomorrow for all of us. Tune in to Campus Climate Corps for news of what is and what is not happening at this year's UN Climate Conference. Prepare for a livable tomorrow with a life and career of action. Join us and become part of the solution.
All right, folks. We'd like to welcome you to day 9 of Campus Climate Corps' coverage of the events taking place at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. As always, my name is Roch Kabajati Jr. I am a director of Campus Climate Corps. We've also got another director of Campus Climate Corps, Michael Fidler, who's going to be joining us here today. And if some of our team will be able to make it, we've got 2 other folks who may be joining us. They're right now stuck on a metro. What another adventure we have here in Baku. Anyway, let's go over some news that had happened today over in Baku, Azerbaijan. 2 U.S. congressmen have reported being verbally assaulted as well as physically assaulted here after making comments about the Armenian issue that has happened here in Azerbaijan. For those of you who don't know, Azerbaijan had invaded Nagorno-Karabakh I believe it was earlier last year, and 2 U.S. congressmen are attending COP this year who are both of Armenian descent. And when asked questions by a journalist here, they reported that they were heavily in favor of releasing Armenian hostages and a peaceful resolution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict that involved having Armenia having a greater seat at the table. 2 of those U.S. congressmen were later accosted at their hotel later that night. Now, also at COP29 today, there were there were much more protests that were seen. At least I saw quite a few more protests. And this begs the question about why during week 2, there always seems to be more protesting than in week 1. And for at least the last few COP conferences that have taken place in cities which are less accessible for students and less accessible for protesting, such as Baku, such as Dubai, such as Sharm el-Sheikh, and countries that have a little bit more of an authoritarian approach to the handling of protesting, it's clear that during week 1, when all the world leaders are here making their fancy speeches and showcasing to the world what they are doing as far as their respective nations on the climate crisis, protesting is not allowed during those times. These countries want to, at least as far as we can tell, appear to be as strong as possible and as authoritarian as possible, so that way everything goes smoothly. But there is some protesting here going on, taking place during week 2. So there's that. There's also been a lot of talk today on the need to step up the international finances. No duh. A lot of developed countries are being encouraged by developing countries, especially there was a lot of speeches today by Micronesia. There were speeches today by Fiji. There were speeches today by, I was sitting next to the delegation from Vanuatu that is also in Oceania. And many of them were making the same statements that we are moving towards carbon neutrality at a faster rate than anybody else is. I think the Costa Rican prime minister was here, president was here, and he just lambasted everybody saying, we're building bridges and we're able to cross those bridges, and the rest of the world is burning their bridges. And he said that Costa Rica, although a small nation, is leading the way when it comes to carbon neutrality. There's also been a lot of talk about what kind of number needs to be set for annual contributions by developing nations to the Loss and Damage Fund, to adaptation finance, to the Global Goal on Adaptation, or the GGA. And a lot of nations are sort of fixating on this $580 billion climate-related damages fund. However, there is no talk here upon the actual fixed, annual limit or annual contribution by developing nations, which has been expected here. So they've said that 580 billion will be given for climate-related damages, but whether or not we reach $1 trillion a year towards both loss and damage, towards adaptation, towards carbon market regulations, those numbers do not seem to be showing up at all. In fact, due to the looming effect of Trump taking over the United States presidency again, there may not even be an agreed upon annual financial monetary goal that is reached here at this climate conference. Now, there's also a lot of talk today on strengthening what's called the Global Goal and Adaptation, the GGA. The GGA is essentially how we're going to track progress and ensure accountability when it comes to adaptation efforts. So we're trying to measure indicators for our adaptation, both in the near and far future, and ensure that that process has complete transparency. So the global goal on adaptation is about what kind of materials are we using to build our buildings. It's where are humans choosing to settle. It's also about how we're tracking our food. Essentially, adaptation involves all of those metrics, mostly because we need to strike a fine balance. At least the world leaders are saying we need to strike a fine balance between resilience and adaptation. Do we continue to live where we currently live, or do we adapt and we move somewhere else in order to prevent climate disasters from affecting our families and affecting government assistance once those climate disasters have taken place? Now, there are continuing discussions today in finalizing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement to ensure that international carbon markets are environmentally sound and contribute effectively to our emission reductions. Now, this does include setting standards and safeguards to protect the environmental integrity and human rights, and et cetera, et cetera. This does not come as a surprise, mostly because there's a lot of protesting of Article 6 even being adopted. There's a lot of dragging of feet about Article 6. So essentially, as we discussed over the past couple of days, and for those of you who are just tuning in now, Article 6 is incredibly important because that establishes how do we trade how do we trade carbon credits? Does a nation who effectively reduces their carbon budget and goes in excess of that, can they sell the difference of that carbon credit to a nation that isn't yet fully met their carbon goals, right? So in a sense, the nation that is still working on reducing their carbon limit can pay for a carbon credit so that they're at least contributing financial money to an excess of what they're reaching as far as their carbon emission reduction. Now, there's also a lot of work right now on operationalizing the enhanced transparency framework. So COP29 is critical here because the Paris Agreement's transparency framework, right, is trying to increase the visibility of all nations' climate actions to ensure the most accountability as possible. And it was written all over the Paris Agreement that international accountability is needed with regard to transparency. So nations that are like the US or China or Costa Rica or what have you, they need to be held to the same standards as the rest of the world. And that means that we need to have a transparency framework that's able to showcase what each of these countries are actually hitting as far as their carbon reduction amounts, such that they're not saying something that's not true. And this is especially true with regard to the carbon market. And in fact, this actually goes to the heart of why it's so hard to create the carbon market, mostly because a lot of folks are worried about transparency issues. A country that says they've met their carbon reduction amount and gone in excess of that, there needs to be some transparency in ensuring that they actually met those targets, that they're actually going in excess of their target amounts. Anyway, to put a fine point on it, COP29 is the COP that has discussed the most finances, but also the least productive when it comes to any sort of financial talk. Not only has there not been any actual agreement made with regard to the carbon market, to Article 6, or to the transparency framework, but it is unlikely that's going to actually happen in a meaningful way prior to Friday, which means that negotiations could extend into next week if they don't fail completely and altogether. Anyway, that is your daily briefing, or at least that is your the news part of our daily briefing. Now, typically we have another member of our campus climate corps team speak, but however, they are apparently still stuck on the metro. So with regard to our next segment, I'm actually going to introduce Michael Fiddler.
Can you hear me, Rock? I'm very sorry. I seem to lost the audio. I just lost the audio.
You can hear me, right?
Now I can hear fine. I'm sorry. I just didn't hear the last two sentences.
Oh, okay. Then I'll reintroduce our very own Michael Fidler, who's going to showcase to us some photos of what's happening today over at COP29.
Okay, thank you for the double introduction. I didn't do it on purpose. I really just lost the sound, but I don't mind. At least now, but everybody knows who I am. So please let me share my screen. There we go. And this is the first image of the day. And it should kind of show you that for me, the day at COP was somehow slow today. I went to the plenaries and I walked around a couple times, and it was either closed because it was just some closed meetings, or it was again the opening statement of the ministers of environment. And I have heard them so many times that I did not really go in at all. Then I walked along some of the meeting rooms. Like yesterday, I wanted to see if the LDC's meeting, the least developed countries meeting, or the daily meeting brought some results, because comparing to yesterday I did not learn anything within an hour. But today, for some reason, it was closed. I hope it's not because of our broadcast, because I was criticizing that 1 hour that was completely wasted there. So once again, when I was in the official part of COP within the plenaries or the meeting rooms, I did not really see much going on. When I went to the delegation pavilions, there was more going on. The first thing that caught my attention was this. I guess it was a workshop or it was a performance. The girl in the green dress made this painting. I did not, well, when I looked at it, I was guessing she was meaning to sort of show the Caspian Sea, because when I look at her feet, she actually did part of the drawing with her own feet. So she was just walking through the paint, and then I talked to her, and yes, it was meant to show how she feels about the Caspian Sea. The issue was that the paint was not drying at all, so it was all wet, and it was just by the entrance. So some people did not really notice, and they walked through it, and they had the paint on their feet. So I can tell you that the cleaning ladies who walk around did not like this performance at all. It was interesting. I don't know why it was in the science for climate action, but it was there. So I thought that I would show you a few images of that. Uh, Obviously, today was Dr. John Capiz with us, and he was very busy talking with some of the volunteers, because as I mentioned previously, the volunteers, they speak very good English. They are from the local universities, and many of them come to COP with an idea that they would do some networking with scientists, with other universities, and maybe they get a chance to go abroad and study abroad as well. So our organization is offering some options there. I know this image, I'm showing it, this famous baby hippo for the third time, but I just cannot help it. There is always a huge queue in front of this porcelain Mudong. And when I told Matthew, our team member, that it's still on, he was just all hot to go there and have his own image there. And there is always the UN security around, and I could tell that this lady was from Thailand, because she was just in the queue. She wanted her image with Mudong as well. I really don't get it, but Mudong is just a hero of Thailand these days. So the Thailand pavilion is quite a bit about this baby hippo. Today was a day also related to tourism, and some of the pavilions were showing some souvenirs, or kind of inviting people to their country. So they were also giving some little gift, and it was quite interesting to walk around and see what's on offer. So this would be an image from the pavilion of Senegal. Um, if you could guess, this is an image from the pavilion of Kazakhstan, and they have a huge wall or huge screen there, and they were just playing in a loop a movie, and it was visually very attractive, because it's about Kazakhstan, but in this image they call it, this country is actually a photostan, because you can take so many images there. Or it could be also a tasty stan. And I agree, when I was in Kazakhstan, I had some of the food. It was really good. And they also could call the country awesome stan. So Kazakhstan is really, to some extent, awesome stan. So I agree with that, and certainly invite everybody to Kazakhstan. You would just, it's an awesome country. One more thing, it was mentioned that there were some protests there today as well. This was one, I believe it was organized by the Faith Pavilion, because there were people of various religions, and there was also this gentleman in the traditional Jewish dress, and there were also some of the protesters who were wearing the Palestinian scarves, and they were taking videos of the Israeli gentlemen very closely. I did not really understand what they were saying, but this is just a close-up shot, and they were making the pro-Palestinian demonstrants were making very clear that they are here too, and they believe that there is some injustice happening in that region. But I'm not going to discuss that because that's not the point of today's presentation. Technically, the most interesting session I saw today, it was the one in the Japanese pavilion, because you can bet that there is always something going on in the Japanese pavilion. Today there was the Japanese Minister of Environment, and he talked mostly about the quality data, how good quality data are needed for good quality decisions, and then they were doing some presentation. It was a little bit over my head, but I'll happily go there again, because the Japanese, they are always ready. They talk about new technologies for green solutions and strengthening climate partnerships. So Japanese pavilion, that's always for me the number one. But as I mentioned, today was the day about urbanization, transport, and tourism. So let me show you a few images of the touristic phase of Baku, because I got a chance during Sunday and also this evening to go to the old town, and let me share some images from there. Now, this is an image from the metro, and in the top right corner, you can see there is a surveillance camera. And I can assure you, it's very hard to take in the center of Baku an image without a surveillance camera being in it, because we are simply watched most of the time. Now, the center of Baku itself is actually pretty nice. You know, there are these leafy streets. Now there is the autumn season just started, but the climate is still pretty mild. It's pretty colorful. There are some parks, and it takes a nice stroll if you just walk around the town. You know, there are some monuments. I mean, I don't really know who is this gentleman, but I would guess it's some poet. I did not really look it up yet. And as you get a little bit closer to the city center, it's greenish and it's pretty modern. This could be any city, very modern city. I would say this could be Dubai easily. It could be Doha. It could be anywhere. So the center of Baku is pretty modern. This would be the house of the government, where the local government is located. And this is probably on the right hand side the most famous building of whole Baku. It's called the Flames Tower. I took this image on purpose because you can see in the left bottom corner the police. There is a lot of police present in town these days. It's not just because of COP, but there are simply many cops in town all the time. Now, this is probably one of the most typical images of Baku, from the banks of the Caspian Sea and the Flames Tower in the background. And I mean, this image looks pretty nice, but the issue with the Caspian Sea, it's polluted. And if you just look on the water, you can see there the little film of the oil, and this image shows why. This image was taken. I took this maybe 6-7 years ago, probably 10 kilometers south of Baku. As soon as you leave Baku, as soon as you leave Baku, the city, there are these oil rigs, and there is a lot of oil drilling going on. That's why the water is still very polluted. But let's stay positive, and this would be one of the most typical images of Baku. It's really, if you would not know anything else about the country and would just look at these images, you would think it's very nice. This is an image of the Maiden Tower. Maiden Tower. Yes, Maiden Tower, which was built sometime during the 12th century, and they say that one of the pearls of Baku itself. Personally, I don't find it that amazing, but few of our team members were really amazed by this building, so I put it here on purpose so you get an idea how the building look like or how the Maiden Tower look like. This image was taken over some carpets which were there on display in town, and it's very typical for Azerbaijan and actually the whole area here. That carpeting is very popular, and if you want to bring home one souvenir, it's usually a carpet. It could be just 10 times 10 centimeters just to have a souvenir, but carpets, it's probably the number one souvenir from here. Or unless you want to bring something more, reminding you the history, because as you walk through the old city, you can also buy these Soviet style hats or caps as you wish. They are still on display and they are ready for tourists to buy them. Maybe another souvenir the tourists can bring from here, this would be the magnets for a fridge. But I don't really buy any souvenirs, so I cannot recommend that much. Now, if you walk through the city center of Baku, there is something what I mean. It's called Walled City of Baku. It's actually the World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's very nice to walk through this cobbled street. There are narrow, they are kind of windy, and if you walk through there and just look here and there, you can find some nice spots and take photos there. And you just get these ornaments on various doors. It is. I would recommend to visit that place. Here are our team members as we were walking through this tiny narrow street there today, all together, to have a sort of a city tour. I was leading a city tour for our group today. Uh, One more image from the old town. Just above the old town, there appeared the Flames Tower, and it adds an interesting contrast. So when the light is also right, it provides a pretty nice opportunity for taking some images there. And as you walk through the walled city, you eventually end up by the Shirvan Shah Palace, which was built in 15th century. So this would be the entrance toward the palace. And these are the images from around the palace. Yet one more from the Shirvanshah Palace. It's very nice. The light in the evening today was very pleasing. So I took some, I would say, pretty nice images there. Now to wrap up, once you walk through the old town, you eventually end up again on the banks of the Caspian Sea, and then you can see the downtown and take the images of the newly built skyscrapers there. But then again, you just turn back and you can see the Flames Tower. And as the evening was setting up and the night was just starting, the Flame Tower start to be lightened and show appear in various colors, obviously showing being very proud that they belong to Azerbaijan. So that those are the national colors of Azerbaijan. And with this being said, this would be the images from me today.
I think that's a very fitting last image there, Michael. I will say that I did buy some souvenirs today. I did haggle just a little bit just to get the full tourist experience. Um, anyway, back to COP29. So next, I'm going to introduce the next member of our team, who was over and listening to some of the many pavilions that were taking place over in COP29. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Matthew Hill. Well, good evening, everyone. It is wonderful to be here tonight, nearing the end of COP29. What a conference it's been so far. I was very lucky today to see some brilliant panels from some world leaders discussing a couple topics regarding the theme of today. And I also saw quite a few more protests. which I would love to talk about. And I'll do that in a second. So, the very first panel that I went to today was a high level roundtable themed around greening urban transport. Um, and so this panel stuck out to me because urban transport is not necessarily an issue that comes to mind when you think about a global climate conference. But it is so important that we do talk about things like that because a lot of the actions that we take and can take in our everyday lives happen at the local level. And so bringing these local issues to an international conference like COP29 can be really impactful towards accomplishing some real change at the community level. And so, for myself personally, I am an avid user of the bus system, of the RTS system in Gainesville, Florida. Public transportation is something that I rely on. So, I have a vested interest in topics like this. And so, seeing something like that, something so important to me just as an individual outside of any academic or activist or scientific things that I do. Um, I'm just passionate about bus systems because they get me to and from school. So it really stuck out to me as finally seeing something that directly impacts my genuine everyday life being discussed at this international climate conference. That was fantastic. And so I got to see some really interesting international leaders, some national leaders, but also some ministers of the environment, and even some speakers from towns. There was one or two cities from the US that had representatives. There was at least one county from Kenya that had a representative. And so there were quite a few just local leaders, probably people that folks from the areas they're representing know personally, got to go up and speak and talk about what their municipality was doing to get people to and from work, to and from school. Um, in a way that is so much better for the climate, measurably so, than individual private transportation through cars. So that was a wonderful panel, and I was so glad to see it. And it really did impact me just on a personal level. So I was very lucky to be able to see something like that. And to be a little bit more topical, there were some folks from Azerbaijan who were speaking at that panel, as they are at all of the panels as the host country. But something really stuck out to me this time because throughout any conference like this, you're going to hear a lot of what's called greenwashing, where people who represent organizations that are not very good for the climate will come up and talk about all the wonderful things that they're doing and downplay the issues and things like that. And the U.S. is guilty of it. Azerbaijan's guilty of it. So many countries are. But in this scenario, I was really pleased to see Azerbaijan's representatives talk about what they talked about, because at least in this specific scenario, they are walking the walk as well. Baku has a pretty decent system of public transportation. We use it every single day from the campus climate core team to get to the conference itself. We use the metro and the bus system that they have set up. And we've used it in some excursions outside of the conference as well. It's been very useful, and while the prices for cabs and such are pretty inexpensive here, it's wonderful to be able to use a system of public transportation. And I'm sure that for the folks who live here full time, it makes their lives so much easier, especially to have a system as adept as Baku's is. I love the RTS system in Gainesville, but it's nowhere near has the levels of investment and dedication that the bus and metro do here in Baku. So it was wonderful to get to see folks from Azerbaijan get up and brag rightfully about the public transportation that they're doing. Um, so that was wonderful. It was a really good change of pace to see people that were talking about good things that we're doing that I've personally benefited from, the good things that they're doing. So that was a wonderful panel on greening urban transport. Um, and later on in the day, I saw another great panel with a few more international leaders, this time not just governmental figures, but a few from world banks, a few from UN organizations. It was a really diverse panel. in terms of positions and organizations folks were coming from. And it was themed around action at the city level. So again, very thematic for this day of the conference to talk about cities and urban development directly. Um, it was again so wonderful to see the local level being brought to international attention. There is so much to be done at this level, and it was being discussed in great detail at this panel. And something that stuck out to me was the direct commitments that banks were talking about. And not, of course, not just normal everyday banks that you go to, but like the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, the Asian Development Bank, a few others like that, talking about what they had done already to provide finances that were available for municipalities and what they were planning on doing. And so again, it was a great change of pace to see not just some words about, oh, the climate's so important, we gotta cut emissions. I saw people going, well, we've already spent this much money towards this city and this city, so that they could do this, and here's what we're going to continue to do. It was wonderful to see things like that from banks, from the UN, things like that. Um, it was just so it's so important to talk about local issues at this level, and it was wonderful to see actual commitments, actual evidence of the work that's been done, um, from so many different folks. So I had a great day at COP, and I really did enjoy these panels, and I'm super lucky to have been able to. Now, outside of those discussions in pavilions, there were a few more protests going on today, and the other night, I said something about how it seems like the demonstrations at COP are getting louder and larger as the days go by, and that still seems to be true, which I found wonderful. Just as we were exiting the conference, we saw a demonstration from some indigenous folks from several different backgrounds, doing some singing and dancing from their traditions and talking about how this conference was impacting them, how it took so much effort for them to get here. And it was really meaningful to see these people get up and speak. And they were also dressed in just some beautiful regalia, which was amazing to see, when everyone is dressed like me in stuffy business suits. To see people in these just wildly colorful clothing from their cultures. That was really awesome. And early in the day, actually, the very first thing I saw when I got to the conference was a demonstration who, unfortunately, I didn't catch the name of the organization or the exact goal that they were talking about, but it was probably the most passionate protest or demonstration that I've seen in a while. And there was one man speaking just very broadly on behalf of the global South on how difficult this conference has been for them. The food prices within the venue have been just astronomically high. And for people to whom even getting here is just a massive struggle, even more than it is for the rest of us, it's very difficult. And he was expressing that very passionately, very eloquently. And there were quite a few signs saying, "Don't gas the South, climate finance now," and grants, not loans, and things like that. And it was really important. It really put things in perspective. Um, it's very easy to talk about how important climate change is, and it's even easier to recognize how impactful it is around the world. But it's not as often that someone who has been impacted so devastatingly by the effects of climate change, that you get to witness them get up and speak on that and very passionately speak on that issue. Um, it was really a meaningful demonstration and something that I'm really glad I saw, but something that we really need more of at these conferences. We've talked a lot about how in recent years, the number of demonstrations, the size of demonstrations has just gone down drastically at these conferences. But that doesn't mean they've become any less important. And so between the panels and the demonstrations today was, at least for me, a very good day at COP29. And I still have hopes for the end of this conference. We don't know exactly where it's going to lead. It doesn't seem like all of the financial goals are going to be anywhere near reached, which is very unfortunate. But there are good things happening, and it's always important to remember that. And with that, I will turn it back over to Rob. All right, and with that, I believe this wraps up our COP briefing today for Campus Climate Corps, and we are incredibly glad to have you on board with us for our, I believe, our 9th day of broadcasting. As a reminder, we have our social media, campus.climatecore for our Instagram and YouTube. We also have our, if you just look up on YouTube, Campus Climate Corps, you should be able to get a hold of us there. We encourage each and every one of you to join us also tomorrow. We will have another briefing as well as Friday. Although you may be seeing Matthew a little bit more on the MC side on those things. I'll keep you folks updated with how my journeys go, and then the rest of the Campus Climate Corps journeys go on our social media. Anyway, that's all for tonight, folks. Take care. We'll see you all tomorrow.